Hey guys, it's Evan from Evan K Exotics. It's mid-October. It's actually a Friday. I took a day off because my family's coming in from Los Angeles. I live in Maine, so I'm pretty excited, but I have to go down and grab and get them in a couple of hours. But other than that, I'm just in here doing some last-minute spot cleaning things so that I don't have to mess with them over the weekend when my family's here. So I'm going to go through and do that. But the subject of today's video is whether or not I think that feeding a variety of prey feeder types and prey items to your boa constrictors or other snakes is a good thing or a bad thing, and just discuss why I believe that. But the other thing I wanted to tell you is I actually shot a video that I'm calling Feeding Boa Constrictors, Managing Mishaps and Demonstrations on with a mouse, a rat, a poultry item, and a couple of rabbits. So I shot this video. It's about 22 minutes long. It talks about safe feeding of snakes all the way from the size of babies all the way up to full-size breedable adults. Talks about how I do it, the tools that I use, and then at the end I go through and I film some feeding demonstrations. I'm not going to be making a ton of feeding videos that show actual feedings just because I don't want to make it for the general audience, but I made that one because I thought it was of interest to people that are serious boa hobbyists or people that maybe are getting young ones and want to see how as they grow they should be feeding their snakes safely. So I'm going to be releasing that soon, but I just want to tease that. But today let's just talk about feeding variety to your snakes. And I'm going to go through and just be changing water bowls and things as I go because my family's going to come in and I need to do some things. But basically, in the hobby, there is a prevailing belief that feeding any snake really probably, a variety of feeder items is a good thing. So you'll see people coming out and they'll be like, I just got this baby boa constrictor and it's on frozen mice or fuzzy mice and I want to start feeding a variety because it's going to eat a variety, and so then I bought these feeder quails and whatnot and anything else. And honestly guys, I think colloquially speaking, feeding a variety of feeder items to your snake is fine. I think that snakes in general are generalist predators, meaning that they will eat a variety of different types of prey and they can do well on those. So I think that the idea of feeding a variety of prey items to your animals is not a bad thing. I feed a variety of animals, different prey items to my animals, and I'm not knocking anything about that. But what I would push back about is this kind of bigger idea that feeding variety is best, or that you need to feed variety to create healthy animals. And the reason I'm going to push back on that is simply because I don't think it's really scientifically supported, and I'm going to unpack some things that people that are really in the feed variety camp talk to me about, and try to argue with me about, and tell you why they just don't really hold water to me. And so I guess this is how do I say this? Whenever I make the statement a varied diet or a mixed diet, meaning different types of feeder items, is not necessarily better than a uniform diet, meaning feeding only one type of feeder items. The first thing that people do that have a personal belief that you should be feeding variety is they go cite your sources, or do you have scientific papers? And they want to really push back on using that. And I just think that's, in general, I think that's what people do when they have an emotional reaction to a statement that they think should have some scientific justification, to buy time for themselves to come up with the rest of their argument. And so here's what I will tell you about demanding a piece of research to say that feeding a uniform diet is better or fine versus a varied diet, is that the first thing you need to do in any type of scientific research paper is to define better in a way that is observable and quantifiable. Meaning that you need to say what is better or best, and it needs to be in some factor that you can observe and quantify and measure for scientific purposes. And so that being the case, there is not a ton of research out there about animals, ectotherms, cold-blooded animals, and varied diets versus uniform diets. But from a scientific perspective, the thing that they're most often using as a metric of best is fast growth rates. So I don't know in the hobby if we would agree that that is the metric of best. I just don't know or not. If we wanted to say what is the best growth, what is best is growth rate. That's because it's easily observable and definable and quantifiable. That's why in research papers they're using those a lot. So what you will find in a lot of that research about ectotherms is with that definition, best is an ideal diet, a quote unquote ideal diet versus a varied diet, meaning that there is one prey item that ectotherms will grow faster on than a different prey item. So if you're defining best as fast growth, a uniform diet, an ideal diet is better than a mixed diet. So that's just what I'll tell you. Those people putting out that cite your sources, give me research papers. I'd say we need to define best first, and they won't even define best for me because it's not really able to define best in this colloquial way because it's not observable and quantifiable. But I will tell you, if you want to find those research papers, start looking at things by like Kevin Arbuckle, and you'll find some research papers about like axolotls and ectotherms. Start looking up papers about the suitability of day-old chicks as snake feeders, and they're comparing corn snakes fed on mice versus chicks. And what you're going to find is one of two things. You're going to find that when the definition of best is fast growth, that an ideal diet, meaning there's one diet that is going to create that burst more so than a varied diet. And the other thing is you're going to find a lot of equanimity in feeder types, meaning that the nutrient profiles of whole prey feeders is not so much different from one to another as it is the nutrient profile is in different proportions. So that's just really the space that you're working with in terms of varied diets, okay? And yeah, it's just the science isn't there to support that a varied diet is better than a uniform diet. Conversely, the science isn't there to support that a uniform diet is better than a varied diet because we can't even define best. I think in the hobby we don't define best in the same way that a scientific keeper would, or a scientific researcher would be defining it. So I just kind of put that aside for you in your head. There's not going to be a lot of scientific research involved in that. And then beyond that, I'll just say that we're talking about colloquial keeping. And colloquially speaking, what is best for our animals is something that they will accept readily, that we can get readily and affordably, that is going to manifest over time a healthy, robust snake of the right body condition. And the truth of the matter is that these animals are generalists, and that they can be, and generalists both mean that they eat a variety in the wild, and also that they can be fine on a large spectrum of different feeding schemes and types. So, colloquially speaking, I have a lot of empathy for people that feed variety purposefully, meaning they're like, oh, today I feed a mouse, next week I feed a poultry item, after that I'm going to feed it a piece of tilapia or whatever, and then go back to the mice and feeding that. If you're going to put the effort into it, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that per se, within reason, but I would also say that I don't know that that's going to actually get you anything better than just feeding it a single type of prey item in the right quantities at the right time, because I think it's more about quantities and time than it is about type of feeder item. Meat items have a very much more limited nutrient profile spectrum than plants do. They do. There are not too many different types of nutrients in the different types of meats. It's just different proportions. And so long as you're not feeding something that's got something detrimental to like thiamine fish or thiaminase fish, you should be fine feeding something in uniformity as long as you're delivering the right amount of calories at the right time. That's just what I would say. And beyond that, guys, I have a lot of empathy for people on both sides of the spectrum because, like we were saying, the science is not there to speak empirically one way or the other. And I think everybody's trying to manifest what's best for their animals, and everybody sees a little bit different things. And I have a lot of empathy for people that are faced with this real kind of anathema of a question. And so that's what I would just tell you. And I think that you're going to be okay feeding variety or feeding only one type of item. So that's just kind of how it is in reality. And the final thing I will tell you is that because we're so thin on research, this might change over time. And I think that what you're going to find is not so much that feeding a variety is better, but what we'll find over time is that we have a precise understanding of the nutrient proportions that these animals need. And over time, through enough study, we might be able to come up with a pretty accurate nutrient profile for each species. and then you could make an assertion of what prey item or variety of prey items was best. But I think that's also just kind of overcomplicating the subject. And the reality is, what you'll probably find is that the ideal nutrient profile is both not available in a single whole prey item, so it'd be looking towards a manufactured feed. As an example, animals that have a lot of research onto what their nutrient needs are, dogs, cats, companion animals, and agricultural animals, they are moving them towards a uniform formulated feed. Kibbles, chows, cat foods, crock chow, all these things are uniform feed. They're not varied diets, they're just ideally formulated for those animals. So it's not so much that people are asking for varied diets. It's not so much that I think a varied diet might be best, is that there's probably an ideal diet for a specific animal at a specific time. And if we knew what that is, that would probably be ideal. We just don't have that available to us. And that also being said, even when we do have those things available to it, it's not like this is the ideal diet for all boa constrictors. It's going to be the ideal diet for this specific animal at this specific life stage. So for example, with chickens, I keep chickens. They have a lot of knowledge about their nutrient needs, and they have multiple different formulas for different lifestyles and different types of birds. They have chick starter, then they have finisher, then they have layer pellets, then I have high protein layer pellets that support them through the molt that they're going through before winter, and then we have a general all-purpose flock feed for if they're off lay and things. So that's just what I would tell you guys, is that feeding a varied diet isn't wrong, but it's not necessarily better. I think that people are having a lot of good intentions when they're feeding whatever feeding scheme that they're feeding, but I don't think it actually matters that much whether you're feeding a variety of different prey, which I do, but I don't necessarily think that feeding a single type prey item for most of the animal's life is a problem either. I actually tend to feed prey items in batches, so I'll feed a variety, but I'll feed all mice, then I'll feed all chicks, then I'll feed all rabbits for a month or 2 months at a time, just because one, I'm getting bags in and I'm just feeding through the bags, and two, I also think it's kind of one of these things where it's like humans, if you go somewhere and eat different types of food, it might upset your stomach, not because the food's bad, but just because you're not used to it. I think that by not just continually throwing different things at them every week, you might be a little more solid for the stomach, especially for BCCs and things like that. I tend to just, if I'm feeding them chickens, I feed them chickens for most of the summer. If I'm feeding them rats, I feed them rats for most of the summer. If I'm feeding rabbits, I feed them rabbits for most of the summer. That's just how it goes for me. But beyond that, guys, I would just tell you that, guys, you're doing the best you can with the limited knowledge we have. Anecdotally, and to give you guys some peace of mind, you can create great healthy animals with whatever feeding scheme you want. If you get too deep in the weeds about thinking that variety is best, I would suggest to you that that is egoism more than it is something that's good for your animals. It's making you feel better because you're like, I'm feeding a variety. It's something that you can do that makes you think that you're caring for your animal more, or would make you feel better. But whether or not that's actually impacting how well your animal is doing, I just don't buy that. I don't think that's true. And I would tell you that if you're feeding variety, do it with some sensibility. Feed them things that are readily available, that are generally accepted as healthy and safe. Don't go to extremes. Don't be feeding them wild-caught prey if you don't need to. Don't be feeding them wild-caught reptiles if you don't need to, or anything else with a parasite risk. Don't be going out and just mixing in those Reptilink sausages because you think it's good for variety. I'm sorry, but it's just stupid to think that a Reptilink for variety's sake is a good idea when you could be feeding that animal whole prey. Reptilinks are for people that can't get their animals to eat some other type of prey. But that's just my opinion on all these things, but I do have a lot of empathy for people that do it whatever way, and I actually don't think that you're harming your animal either way. But I don't think varied diets in and of themselves are necessarily better. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.